Hey there, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews and welcome to my video on the top 10 best romances and relationships in the realm of Star Trek. This list is based on my opinion and my opinion alone, but please feel free to share some of your favorite romances and relationships in Star Trek that maybe I didn't put on my personal list in the comments below. So this video is a companion video to one that I made last week, which was the top 10 worst romances and relationships in Star Trek. The episodes in this video are in a lot of ways the polar opposite of many of the episodes that I talked about last week. Last week I kept saying there is no chemistry, there is no chemistry. Whereas the episodes in this week's video have so much chemistry, it just doesn't even all fit on the periodic table. Okay, bad joke. Bad chemistry joke. Let's move on. Anyways, so I do want to just review quickly what I mean by romances versus relationships. I did mention it last week, but it's worth revisiting. When I say romance, I'm talking about the one-off romances. So two characters get together and have a relationship within one 45 to 50 minute episode. And typically we're talking about one main character in the show and one guest character. And then when we're talking about relationships, I'm talking about long-term relationships over a series of episodes or even seasons involving two main cast members or at least two regularly occurring characters on the show. Now, when it comes to those one-off romances, those are very difficult to pull off. Star Trek attempted it way too often, and 99% of the time it failed. In my top 10 worst romances, I did feature some of those, but there were actually many, many, many more that didn't fit in a top 10 because there's just so many of them. It's a really difficult thing to pull off because it's hard to encapsulate human love and relationship in one 45 to 50 minute episode. It's really difficult. So therefore, when it does happen, and it only happens twice on my list, only twice. Only two of them are one-off romances. When it does happen, though, I am so blown away that they were able to pull it off, that both of those type of episodes in this list are in my top 3 because I'm just so impressed that they were actually able to do it. Now, when it comes to the long-term relationships, so 8 out of the 10 on this list fit into that category. But I noticed an interesting pattern after I created my list that I didn't even think about as I was making it. My list is split evenly in half. So half of them are modern Trek and the other half are Deep Space Nine. I didn't even realize that until after I made the list. So by modern Trek, I mean new Trek with the NU. I really hate that term. Modern Trek meaning Discovery and forward. And I think that is because television writers in general, I think, have gotten better at writing more sophisticated romances and relationships. Whereas in the past, it was just all about like sex appeal and appealing to wide audiences. So it would just be this very simplistic surface level romance full of cliches. Whereas I think these days, in the modern day, you will see more sophisticated writing when it comes to relationships and romances. And I think that's why modern Trek probably makes up half of the 8 entries on this list to fit that category. The other half are Deep Space Nine. And I was really surprised. I surprised myself that that was the case. So that tells me that I really think highly of the writers on Deep Space Nine and how they were able to write romances and relationships back in the day. Certainly they did a much better job than all the other Trek shows of the era. Definitely better than Voyager. Voyager sucked at it. Not that Deep Space Nine is perfect. If you watch my worst list that I did last week, there's a couple of Deep Space Nine entries on there. But you will see by watching this video that I do think highly of a lot of the romances and relationships on Deep Space Nine. Okay, that's way too much preamble, so let's go ahead now and jump into my top 10, starting with my number 10. So at number 10 on my list, Worf and Dax from Deep Space Nine. So each of these characters appear on my worst romance list with a different partner that they had prior to Worf and Dax getting together. And here, these characters are done justice. These characters each get a partner that they deserve, that fits them well. Now, it had been established before Worf even joined the cast that JADZIA had this Klingon connection. She was doing her adventures with Core and all of that stuff. But that didn't necessarily have to mean that Worf and Dax should fall into a relationship. The writers certainly could have forced it because of that, but they didn't. This is really something that develops naturally and organically because of the chemistry that these two characters naturally have when they are on screen together. And they're a really good pair. Like, they're a great foil for each other. Dax gets Worf to kind of stop and think before acting because he's all, warrior-like and wants to be all aggressive or whatnot. And Worf actually is able to reel Dax in a little bit when she's acting a little rash. It's too bad that Worf wasn't around for that season 3 romance that made my worst list, because he maybe could have talked her out of it. Anyways, I think they're a really great couple and a really well-written long-term relationship. However, the reason why this is way back at number 10 on my list and not higher is because the episodes that are about them, I usually don't like them. Let He Who Is Without Sin is one of my least favorite episodes in the series. And then the episode where they get married, I didn't like that one either. Like, I thought that this couple deserved a better wedding episode than what they got. So that's why it's only at number 10. However, it's a strong enough relationship to make the list. And it is my 10th favorite romance and relationship in Star Trek. At number 9, KEIKO and Miles O'Brien, staying in the Deep Space Nine realm. And I do count this as Deep Space Nine, even though they did first get together on The Next Generation. In The Next Generation, Miles O'Brien was a secondary character, and KEIKO was really a nothing character. And in fact, I think she was invented just as a plot device for Data in the episode Data's Day, where they needed Data to be involved in some kind of wedding. They were just like, oh, let's just have Miles O'Brien get married. He's a secondary character, whatever. But she develops into more than that. There's a comical scene in the episode Disaster where Worf delivers her baby, Molly. But it's Deep Space Nine when O'Brien is able to become a main cast member that KEIKO becomes more important and the relationship becomes more in the forefront. And the reason why this relationship makes this list is because it is the example of the best marriage and family on Star Trek. It just feels very authentic when you see the two of them together kind of bickering like a married couple, or you see them discussing what they're going to do with their kids. It just feels very, very true to life. And I'm gonna say the opposite of what I said last week. There is so much chemistry between these two, and I think it's something that does develop organically over time, because as I said, at first there really wasn't much to it. But eventually you do see that these two characters have a very strong bond together, and when they do get in a marital spat or they get into a disagreement, you can tell that they still genuinely care for one another. Unlike the Tom Paris and B'Elanna relationship that I talked about in last week's video, these two characters actually have something real and organic that feels real even when they are having a disagreement, and that is why they are number 9 on my best romance and relationship list. At number 8, Cassidy Yates and Benjamin Sisko. Deep Space Nine again? What? So this one actually got off to kind of a rough start. I didn't think it was that great in the beginning when they first introduced it. I thought the writers were just trying to force a girlfriend on Benjamin Sisko, and I didn't think it really worked. But over time, these two characters, and more importantly, these two actors, are really able to organically develop this chemistry together to the point where it does eventually really, really work. And the episode where that really begins for me is the episode For the Cause, where Benjamin Sisko rightfully suspects Cassidy of supporting the Maquis, and of course that creates a big issue between the two of them. And sometimes the best written relationships do have to show us how the characters overcome adversity, and that was a pretty big one, and there were some really touching scenes in that episode as a result of that. Some heartbreaking scenes, I should say. Then of course they kind of yada yada past her going off to prison or whatever, and they just sort of forget about it later, but that's fine. The other episode that really cements this to me as one of the best relationships in Star Trek is that finale, What We Leave Behind, where Sisko has to leave Cassidy behind and the unborn child that she is carrying, and has a really powerful goodbye scene with her as he goes off to become a spirit or whatever with the prophets. Super powerful. And this actually is only the first relationship that has a very touching goodbye scene in the Deep Space Nine finale. So stay tuned a little bit later on in the video for this second one. At number 7, let's go ahead and leave Deep Space Nine for a little bit and jump into some modern Trek with Spock and T'Pring from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And yes, I am specifically referring to the versions of these characters from Strange New Worlds. I am not talking about Amok Time, as it was a very different dynamic in that episode. In fact, this relationship is really retconned into the show, but it's a retcon that I really love, because they do such an amazing job with these two characters and showing us for the first time a Vulcan relationship. I think they had to fudge the Punfar thing a little bit, but it works because these two characters, these two actors, have amazing chemistry together, and this is on full display in the episode Spock Amok, which has a silly premise with the body switching trope, but it really works for me, even though I don't typically like that trope, because both actors do an amazing job playing the opposite role and still maintaining that same chemistry. Although I actually think that the episode a couple episodes later, Serene Squall, is even a better episode for these two, as it really showcases Spock's struggle with his humanity versus his drive for logic, and how that is a struggle for T'Pring as well. Oh my god, these actors do such a great job with such a sophisticated storyline that I do not care that this is not at all what was intended in the episode Amok Time in the original series, and I cannot wait to see more of them in season 2 of Strange New Worlds. At number 6, Adira and Gray from Star Trek Discovery. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, of course, you're the trans woman, so of course you're gonna have the trans people on your list. Well, partially, yeah, kind of, because trans representation in the media is extraordinarily important, especially with Star Trek when it's trying to portray this utopian future. Trans representation is important, and while I myself was trying to figure out who I was and struggling with my gender identity, trans representation in the media was really, really important for me. I'm thinking specifically of Sense8 was really, really helpful. It's really helpful to see yourself on the TV screen, and hopefully Adira and Gray can be an inspiration for trans youth who are watching Star Trek. But that is not the only reason that this is on the list. If it was just merely representation without any depth to it, then I would probably be thinking of it more as queer baiting and nothing more. But these two characters really do have a really special chemistry together. And it's not just that they're trans, but I also feel that this is the rare youth representation in Star Trek where you have two young people having an ongoing relationship where they are each trying to figure themselves out, figure out where they fit into the grand scheme of things in the universe. And both were doing that in season 3, even though Gray was kind of technically dead. but I think it was more ADIRA in season 3 and then Gray in season 4. They work so well together. And whenever you see an interview with these two actors, you can tell that they just get along so well, and that's really, really important when portraying a relationship on the screen. Now, I'm not sure what the future holds for this couple, since there really isn't a good place for Gray on Discovery. He ends up going off to Trill, so I don't know how they're going to work it in season 5. However, what we've seen in season 3 and 4 is really, really good. At number 5, Odo and Kira jumping back into Deep Space Nine. Now, what makes this relationship really unique compared to a lot of the other relationships in Star Trek is that it was clearly not something that was just forced together by the writers saying, oh, well, let's just put this character over here with this character over there, chemistry be damned, and let's just see what happens. This is a relationship that was allowed to develop organically over a long period of time. In fact, throughout most of the first 6 seasons of Deep Space Nine, they weren't in a romantic relationship at all. They were just really close friends. And it's a friendship that really developed naturally over time, and their bond grew stronger and stronger over time until it got to the point where it made a lot of sense for their relationship to turn into something a little more romantic. Earlier on in the 6th season, before they got together, they went through the ringer together during the station takeover arc, where Odo nearly betrayed Kira and all of their friends to the Dominion, but then was able to turn it around at the last minute. But that's something that nearly broke their friendship forever, and is something that they eventually were able to overcome and become stronger together for it, and that then eventually led to them getting together romantically. It is unfortunate that the first episode that they get together is an awful Vic Fontaine episode. I'm going to restrain myself from ranting about Vic Fontaine here, but at some point in the near future, I will be doing the 10 worst and best holodeck episodes, and you better believe that I will be ranting about Vic Fontaine there. Now, putting Vic Fontaine aside, the thing that really, really cements this relationship on this list for me is something I've alluded to earlier. This is the second teary goodbye that takes place in the Deep Space Nine finale, and I would say an even more powerful one than the Sisko and Cassidy Yates one, as Kira has to come to the realization that Odo needs to do something bigger than her. He needs to go and help his people to see that the solids are not that bad. And this is a very, very important thing to do. So she has to learn to let him go. And their goodbye is so powerful and so emotional. Really, really great. Really powerful ending to a great relationship in Deep Space Nine. At number 4, Stamets and CULBER from Star Trek Discovery. And just as I said with ADIRA and Greg, this is not on here just merely because it is LGBTQ, although that is very important. This was the first long-term ongoing LGBTQ relationship in Star Trek. And the two actors, who are both LGBTQ in real life, I think took that very, very seriously and understood the weight of what they were doing and wanted to make sure that they did it well. And it shows. And I also think that the writers did an excellent job with this relationship. And I'm sure that these two probably would have some things to say if the writers were ever lacking in showing this relationship And as I've mentioned with Odo and Kira and Cassidy and SISKO, there was a lot of adversity that they had to overcome, and I think it makes them stronger. There was, of course, the whole thing with CULBER dying and then coming back to life and then not wanting to be in a relationship with STAMETS because he's a changed person, and then that's a thing they get over. But they're constantly struggling and working to make their relationship better, which is really true to life in a strong relationship. Now, of course, they also have this family with my number 6, ADIRA and Gray, and that becomes very important for the characters as well, and that all feels really real and genuine. And in fact, I have heard that the 4 actors in real life also see themselves as a little LGBTQ family in the cast, and it shows on screen as well. So not just the first LGBTQ relationship ongoing in Star Trek, but also a really strong and authentic one. At number 3, Tasha Yar and Lieutenant Frank Castillo from the Next Generation 3rd season episode Yesterday's Enterprise. So now we are moving into the first of 2 one-off romances, and as I told you at the top of this video, my one-off romances, both of them, are in my top 3 because I'm just so impressed when the show is able to do this well, because it is so hard to do. And I think what this does well is that it avoids falling into the trap that almost all 45 to 50 minute one-off romance relationships fall into, something that I talked a lot about in my worst list, which is that they try to portray it as something that it clearly is not. Even though the 2 characters just met 5 minutes ago, the show wants us to think that this is some deep, unmovable love that they've had for their whole lives, and it's just not true. But in this case, they don't try to portray it as that. They don't try to portray it as anything other than it is. And what it is just 2 people who met each other in a life or death situation where things are not looking good, and they don't see any path to them ever actually being together, but there's just a lot of feeling of what if, what if we could be together? What if we could actually explore this and make it into something deeper that it won't be in a 50-minute episode because we just met? There's that line that Frank Castillo has, if you see this old man with this faraway look in his eye, Shooter McGavin's not the greatest actor, but it was good. And then they get to a situation where they both believe that they are about to die. I mean, Tasha Yar technically does live long enough to give birth to a Romulan clone of herself, but that's a whole other story we don't need to get into right now. But they do believe that they are going to die. And so it is very much let's enjoy every moment that we have. It's too bad we don't get to know each other better, but let's enjoy what we have. And that's very real and very powerful. And I so appreciate so much that they did not try to make this out into anything other than what it is. And they did such an amazing job with this. It's an amazing episode overall, but this romance is a part of why I love this episode so much. At number 2, Burnham and Book, otherwise known as Michael Burnham and Cleveland Booker from Star Trek Discovery. Now, like with Odo and Kira, this relationship began as a friendship, but unlike with Odo and Kira, I'm pretty sure this was always planned to develop into a romance, but they decided to wisely have a slow burn and kind of start it off as a friendship and let it develop organically and naturally into a romance. And I gotta believe that when they hired David Agella to play Book at the beginning of season 3, that they did some screen tests with him and Sonequa Martin Green just to see what their chemistry was like, because their chemistry is just unbelievable. The chemistry is just seeping off of the screen. Like, forget about the periodic table. It doesn't even fit on the television screen. This chemistry is so good between these 2. So it starts off in season 3 as a really strong relationship, But Season 4 is what made it next level. Season 4 of Discovery is what puts this relationship all the way up at number 2 on my list. And in fact, since my number 1 is a one-off romance, I consider this to be the best ongoing relationship in all of Star Trek. And here's why. Season 4 of Discovery took the concept I mentioned earlier of a couple overcoming adversity to the next level, as these two have a fundamental difference of philosophy when it comes to how to handle a really important life or death situation with the whole galaxy at stake. And this is shown to perfection in the episode, but to connect where each of them make their case. Book making the case for just destroying the anomaly that has been killing people, and Burnham making the case for approaching this more diplomatically and approaching species 10C first before just destroying their weapon. And they both make really good cases, and you can see just how heartbreaking it is for each of them to have to be on opposite sides of this very important issue. And then we follow that up with the episode All In, and you can say all you want about the silliness of the casino and the poker game and the random villains coming out of nowhere, which I agree is silly. But what is important about that episode is how these two characters are simultaneously actively working against each other, but also protecting one another and showing the most immense amount of caring and love for each other while they're working against each other. That is perfecto. That is just perfect writing and perfect acting between these two actors, and that is something that carries forward not just in that episode, but episodes afterward. And this is the mother of all relationships overcoming adversity. And though I did say earlier in my previous reviews that I think Burnham's character would have been better off, honestly, if Book had actually died, but I am actually looking forward to see what they do with this amazing couple in Season 5 of Discovery. This is the best ongoing relationship in Star Trek, in my opinion, and it falls number 2 overall on my list of romances and relationships in Star Trek. Number 1! And the number 1 best romance in Star Trek is Edith Keeler and Captain Kirk from the original series episode, The City on the Edge of Forever. This has to be number 1 for me because in an era where Star Trek loved to do all these crappy one-off romances where they tried to pretend that the two characters had some deep love, but really there was nothing there, this really stands out as an incredible achievement. And unlike what I said with my previous one-off, Tasha Yar and Lieutenant Frank Castillo, when I was saying that they weren't trying to portray it for anything more than it was, here, that is also true. They weren't trying to portray it for anything more than it was, but they were portraying it as some deep romance, deep love that's deeply rooted, and they're really, really into each other as if they've known each other for a long time. And it works! That's what makes this so amazing, that it actually works. And I give all the credit in the world to Joan Collins. I maintain that she is the best guest actor in the history of Star Trek. She is amazing. She is so good that she actually makes William Shatner look like a good actor. If you know my channel, you know that I am not a fan of William Shatner's acting. I don't think he's very good, generally speaking, but he nails it in this episode. He's absolutely amazing, and I give Joan Collins all the credit, and I also give a lot of credit to the chemistry that these two actors have on screen. It is just, once again, chef's kiss. Mwah! Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And of course, this is one of the most tragic love stories in all of Star Trek, if not in all of television, where Kirk is forced to let her die in order to maintain the timeline. Oh, one of the most powerful scenes in all of Star Trek, and it is all due to the believable chemistry between these two characters and these two actors all throughout the episode. Absolutely the best one-off romance and the #1 overall romance and relationship in Star Trek of all time. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this list as much as I enjoyed making it. Please join me next month as I move on to a new topic, time travel. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.